7:30 p.m., Friday, 25th February 2022. Castle Crescent, Stourbridge, a quiet cul-de-sac in the West Midlands where the most dramatic thing that typically happens is a neighbour's poorly parked car blocking someone's driveway. Tonight, a stolen silver Renault Laguna pulls up outside number 20. The engine cuts, 6 doors open, 6 figures emerge, faces hidden behind balaclavas and ski masks. They move toward a semi-detached house with purpose. The front door is unlocked. It swings open. What happens in the next 4 minutes will turn £180 into life sentences. A family's ordinary evening will become permanent trauma. A sawn-off shotgun will fire once. John Jones will die in his bedroom. His son Sebastian will collapse with multiple stab wounds. And Ravi Talwar, a man whose pride couldn't tolerate an unpaid drug debt, will become a murderer over an amount of money most people spend on a weekly shop. But before that single shotgun blast, before Sebastian fights for his life in the dining room, before David Jones recognizes a voice behind a balaclava, we need to understand how something this catastrophic started with something this small. Because this case isn't just about what happened when 6 masked men invaded a home in Stourbridge. It's about how a minor drug debt, wounded pride, and catastrophically poor judgment created one of the most thoroughly documented and most preventable murders West Midlands police have investigated in recent years. The debt was £180. The cost? 1 life, decades of imprisonment, a family's permanent trauma, and a trail of evidence so comprehensive that solving the case became less about detective work and more about cataloguing the sheer volume of mistakes the perpetrators made. If careful, UK-focused crime reporting matters to you, a quick subscribe to UK True Crime Files helps us cover more cases like this one, responsibly and thoroughly. We don't sensationalize. Number 20 Castle Crescent was an unremarkable semi-detached house in Stourbridge, a market town in the West Midlands where rows of similar homes line quiet residential streets. The Jones family, John, his partner David, and John's son Sebastian, lived there in relative anonymity. John Jones, known to friends as Gummer, was 35 years old. He worked irregular hours, knew people in the local drug scene, and by February 2022 had accumulated a debt that would cost him everything. On the evening of the 25th, the house was occupied but relaxed. Sebastian was downstairs with a friend, gaming with music playing in the background, the universal soundtrack of teenage evenings. David was upstairs in bed. John was in his bedroom with a visitor, Justin Foxhall, likely discussing the very debt that was about to arrive at his door with lethal force. The debt itself was mundane, £175 to £180, owed to Ravi Talwar for what investigators believe was a cannabis transaction. In the hierarchy of criminal enterprises, this was bottom tier. Pocket change in the drug trade, the kind of amount that gets settled with a bank transfer or forgotten after a few weeks in legitimate business. But the drug economy doesn't operate on legitimate business principles. It operates on reputation. Ravi Talwar was not a criminal mastermind. He was not a feared drug lord or a calculating killer. He was a man in his 30s from the West Midlands whose ego had been bruised by an unpaid debt. In the street economy, where reputation is currency, being mugged off, disrespected, ignored, made to look weak, carries consequences beyond the monetary loss. For Talwar, John Jones's failure to pay wasn't just about £180. It was about being seen as someone whose debts could be ignored, someone who could be disrespected without consequence, someone weak. This perception, this wounded pride, would drive every decision Talwar made over the following weeks, and every decision he made was catastrophically, fatally wrong. Talwar didn't plan the Castle Crescent invasion alone. He assembled a crew that read like a casting call for a low-budget crime film that never should have been green-lit. Kevin Waldron, 44, would serve as getaway driver and coordinator, a role that sounds professional until you realize the getaway vehicle was a stolen Renault Laguna that would be burned and abandoned within an hour, leaving a smoke plume visible across Stourbridge. Scott Garrington, 42, acted as facilitator and participant, present during planning, present during execution, and present in the phone records that would later document every step of the conspiracy. Then there were 3 teenagers, aged 15, 16, and 17 at the time. Armed with kitchen knives and an imitation Glock pistol, they represented the muscle of the operation. Young enough to be in school, old enough to be charged with manslaughter. On that Friday evening, as Sebastian played video games downstairs and John sat in his bedroom upstairs, Tail War and his crew were already in motion. The Renault Laguna was stolen, the weapons were loaded, the balaclavas were distributed. The teenagers were briefed: get in, find drugs and cash, get out. No one planned for John to die. At least, that's what the defense would later claim. But plans and intentions dissolve in moments of violence, and the moment Tail War walked up those stairs with a loaded shotgun, every outcome became possible. They made their first serious mistake when they chose Castle Crescent as a target. Actually, it was closer to their 5th mistake, but who's counting? West Midlands police would count, meticulously, for months. The Renault Laguna comes to a stop outside number 20. 6 figures exit with practiced efficiency, the only competent thing they'll do all evening. They approach the semi-detached house in 2 groups. 3 teenagers heading for the ground floor, Tail War and 2 others moving toward the stairs. The unlocked front door swings open without resistance. No forced entry, no alarm. Just 6 masked men walking into a family home as if they'd been invited. 3 teenagers in balaclavas appear in the doorway, knives drawn, the imitation Glock raised and pointed. Shouting begins immediately. Where's the drugs? Where's the cash? Where's the fucking money? Sebastian's friend freezes. Sebastian tries to move, toward the dining room, toward any exit, toward safety that doesn't exist. The teenagers intercept him. The first stab wound hits his back, then his neck, then his shoulder. The teenagers are frenzied, chaotic, stabbing with the uncontrolled violence of amateurs who've watched too many films and understood none of the consequences. A blade punctures Sebastian's lung. Another severs nerves in his shoulder. He's conscious throughout, feeling every impact, fighting to breathe, collapsing toward the dining room floor. The music is still playing. His friend is screaming. The teenagers are demanding drugs and cash that don't exist, or exist in quantities too small to justify this level of violence. Blood pools on the carpet. Sebastian is 19 years old. 4 minutes ago, he was holding a game controller. Now he's dying on his dining room floor, while 3 masked teenagers rifle through drawers and shout questions he can't answer. Upstairs, his father is about to die. John Jones hears the chaos below, the shouting, the screaming, the unmistakable sounds of violence in his own home. He's in his bedroom with Justin Foxhall. They hear footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate, coming toward them. Ravi Tailwar appears in the doorway, balaclava covering his face, sawn-off shotgun in his hands. There's a brief exchange. Witnesses will later disagree on the exact words, but the substance is clear. Tailwar is here for his money. John tries to de-escalate. "I'll get it to you, I'll sort it." The promises of a man who knows he's run out of time to make good on previous promises. Tailwar raises the shotgun, points it at John at point-blank range. He fires. The blast is deafening in the confined space of the bedroom. John Jones falls. The single shotgun cartridge, fired from less than a meter away, is instantly fatal. Justin Foxhall is in the room when it happens. He survives unharmed physically, but he's now a witness to murder. a fact that will prove critical when West Midlands police begin piecing together who pulled the trigger. David Jones is in bed in another room when he hears the shotgun blast. It's unmistakable, a sound that penetrates walls and consciousness, a sound that announces death has entered the house. He moves toward the hallway, toward John's bedroom, toward the worst moment of his life. He sees Ravi Talwar on the stairs, descending from John's bedroom, shotgun still in hand, balaclava still covering his face. But David recognizes something the balaclava can't hide: the voice. Talwar speaks, either to David directly or to the teenagers below, and David Jones knows, with the certainty that will later convince a jury, exactly who just murdered his partner. Talwar issues his threats at the top of the stairs. Anyone comes down, they're getting shot. Then, for emphasis, as if the body upstairs and the blood downstairs weren't message enough, "Call the police, you're dead." They run to the car. Doors slam, engine starts. The Renault Laguna pulls away from Castle Crescent, leaving behind a family destroyed, neighbors emerging from their homes in shock, and a trail of evidence so comprehensive that West Midlands police will later wonder if the perpetrators were actively trying to get caught. While Ravi Talwar and his crew think they're escaping into the night, they're actually driving directly into the most comprehensive evidence trail in recent West Midlands criminal history. In the immediate aftermath, adrenaline and panic drive their decisions. They need to dispose of the stolen car. They need to dump the weapons. They need to separate and disappear. These are, in theory, sensible goals for criminals fleeing a murder scene. The execution, however, is spectacular in its incompetence. The Renault is driven to Gibbet Lane in Stourbridge, a location that will later appear in CCTV footage, phone tower records, and witness statements. There, in an act they presumably believe will destroy evidence, they set the car alight. Petrol ignites. Flames consume the interior. Smoke billows into the evening sky. A plume visible across Stourbridge, a beacon announcing "Crime scene here" to anyone with functioning eyes. From Gibbet Lane, the crew switches to a Range Rover and drives to Wolverhampton. They have weapons to dispose of: the sawn-off shotgun that killed John Jones, the kitchen knives that nearly killed Sebastian, the spent shotgun cartridge, and the imitation Glock that terrorized a teenage boy in his own living room. They dump everything in a public wheelie bin, on a street in a residential area of Wolverhampton where anyone could see them, where CCTV cameras are mounted, where waste collection schedules are predictable and documented. David Jones eventually called 999, Talwar's threats notwithstanding, because his partner was dead and his son was dying. Paramedics treat Sebastian at the scene before rushing him to hospital. He's lost significant blood, his lung is punctured, nerves are severed, but he's conscious, he's talking, and he's describing his attackers. 3 teenagers, balaclavas, knives, chaos. His testimony begins within minutes of the assault. David Jones, traumatized but coherent, gives his initial statement. 6 men, balaclavas, shotgun blast, and crucially, "I recognized that voice." He doesn't know Ravi Talwar's name yet, but he knows the voice, and that recognition will prove central to the investigation. Justin Foxhall, the witness in John's bedroom when the shotgun fired, provides his account. The confrontation, the brief exchange, the point-blank shot. He can't identify Talwar by sight. The balaclava prevented that, but he can describe exactly what happened in those final seconds of John Jones's life. Forensic investigators document the scene with methodical precision. Blood spatter patterns on the dining room floor tell the story of Sebastian's assault. The spent shotgun cartridge in John's bedroom tells the story of his murder. Footprints, fabric fibers, disturbed furniture. Every detail is photographed, measured, and catalogued. The house itself becomes evidence, a 3-dimensional crime scene that investigators will reference throughout the investigation and trial. West Midlands police will find the weapons within days. the sawn-off shotgun, still bearing the cartridge that killed John Jones, the knives, still carrying Sebastian's blood, the imitation Glock, complete with fingerprints, the cartridge, with ballistic markers that match the wound in John's body. Every item is photographed, catalogued, and sent for forensic analysis. DNA is extracted, fingerprints are lifted, gunshot residue is detected and measured. The forensic team doesn't need to work particularly hard. The perpetrators have essentially packaged the evidence for them like a murder investigation care package. While forensic teams process physical evidence, digital investigators are building a parallel case from phone records, cell tower data, and call logs. Modern criminals operate in a surveillance infrastructure they can't escape. Every call pings a tower, every message leaves metadata, every phone movement traces a route through the digital landscape. Ravi Talwar's phone places him in Stourbridge at the time of the murder. Kevin Waldron's phone tracks the journey from Castle Crescent to Gibbet Lane to Wolverhampton. Scott Garrington's phone reveals communication with other crew members before, during, and after the raid. The teenagers' phones document their movements, their coordination, their presence at the scene. Text messages recovered from the phones show planning discussions. Call logs reveal who contacted whom and when. The digital trail doesn't just place them near the crime, it documents conspiracy, coordination, and intent. West Midlands police don't need confessions. The phones confess for them. Every clever move acted as evidence amplification. Every attempt at disposal became evidence preservation. Every effort to escape created a trail that led directly back to them. By the time West Midlands police began making arrests, the question wasn't, who done it? The evidence had already answered that question comprehensively. The question was, how could anyone be this careless? Arrests happen in the early morning hours, days after the Castle Crescent raid. Armed police execute warrants simultaneously across the West Midlands, Stourbridge, Wolverhampton, surrounding areas. The timing is coordinated to prevent suspects from warning each other, destroying remaining evidence, or fleeing. Ravi Talwar is arrested at a residential address. He's informed he's being detained on suspicion of murder. His home is searched, phones are seized, clothing is collected for forensic testing. He says little during the arrest, shock perhaps, or the delayed realization that the 4 minutes at Castle Crescent have ended his freedom for decades. Kevin Waldron is taken into custody without incident. His phone, the one that tracked every movement from planning to disposal, is immediately seized and sent for digital forensic analysis. Scott Garrington's arrest follows the same pattern. Early morning, armed police, immediate seizure of digital devices and potential evidence. The 3 teenagers are arrested with appropriate youth protocols. Parents or guardians notified, appropriate adults present, recognition that despite their violent actions, they're legally children facing adult consequences. By the time interviews conclude, West Midlands police have compiled a case file that prosecutors will later describe as one of the most thoroughly documented murders in recent West Midlands history. Physical evidence: the sawn-off shotgun with Talwar's DNA, the knives with Sebastian's blood and defendant's fingerprints, the spent cartridge matching the weapon and the wound, the burned Renault with traceable history, the imitation Glock with recoverable prints, digital evidence, phone records placing all 6 defendants at the scene, call logs documenting planning and coordination, text messages revealing intent, tower pings mapping routes from planning to execution to disposal, visual evidence, CCTV footage covering the journey to Castle Crescent, the arrival, the departure, the burning car at Gibbet Lane, the weapon disposal in Wolverhampton, multiple cameras, multiple angles, continuous documentation, testimonial evidence, David Jones's voice recognition, Sebastian Jones's descriptions of his attackers, Justin Foxall's witness account of John's shooting, neighbors who saw the Renault arrive and heard the shotgun blast. Forensic evidence: blood spatter analysis from the dining room, ballistic evidence from John's bedroom, gunshot residue on Tailwar's clothing, DNA traces throughout the crime scene matching defendants. Wolverhampton Crown Court, a modern judicial building in the heart of the West Midlands, becomes the stage where 6 months of police work transforms into public accountability. The trial begins with all 6 defendants in the dock: Ravi Tailwar, Kevin Waldron, Scott Garrington, and 3 teenagers whose identities are protected by youth reporting restrictions. They face a jury of 12, a judge experienced in complex murder cases, and a prosecution team armed with evidence that fills multiple binders. The prosecution's opening statement is methodical rather than theatrical. The Crown doesn't need dramatic flair when the facts are this stark. The barrister lays out the narrative: a £180 drug debt, wounded pride, a planned home invasion, a shotgun fired at point-blank range, a teenage boy stabbed multiple times, and 6 defendants who left an evidence trail so comprehensive it borders on confession. The prosecution begins with scene evidence: photographs, diagrams, forensic reports that document exactly what happened at Castle Crescent. The jury sees images of the dining room where Sebastian Jones collapsed, blood pooling on the carpet, furniture disturbed by the struggle. They see photographs of John Jones's bedroom, the spent shotgun cartridge on the floor, the position of his body when paramedics arrived. These aren't gratuitous images designed to inflame emotion. They're documentary evidence establishing the physical reality of the violence. The prosecution is careful to present them clinically, with forensic experts explaining what each photograph demonstrates about the assault and the shooting. This was an execution, not a warning shot or an accident. The defense cases, presented in the trial's 5th and 6th weeks, attempt to create separation between defendants and their actions, distance that the evidence won't permit. Ravi Tailwar's defense is the most challenging. His barrister can't deny he was present. The evidence is overwhelming. Instead, they attempt to argue lack of intent. This was meant to be intimidation, not murder. The shotgun was for show, not use. The firing was a panicked reaction, not premeditated execution. Under cross-examination by the prosecution, this argument crumbles. Why load a shotgun if not intending to potentially fire it? Why enter someone's bedroom with a loaded weapon if murder isn't at least a considered possibility? The prosecution doesn't need to prove Tailwar intended to kill John Jones when he woke up that morning, only that he intended to kill him in the moment he pulled the trigger. Kevin Waldron's defense attempts the minimal participation strategy. Yes, he drove the car, but he didn't know murder would occur. He thought it was just debt collection. The prosecution dismantles this by asking simple questions. What did you think the shotgun was for? What did you think the knives were for? When the car came back with blood on the floor, what did you think had happened? Waldron's answers are evasive, contradictory, and ultimately unconvincing. Scott Garrington's barrister argues he was present but not active, an observer rather than a participant. The phone records suggest otherwise, documenting coordination and communication that indicate active involvement. The prosecution invokes joint enterprise. If you participate in a violent raid where murder is a foreseeable consequence, you share responsibility for that murder. The 3 teenagers face the most sympathetic defenses. They're young, they were influenced by older criminals, they didn't pull the trigger. Their barristers emphasize their ages, their lack of mature judgment, their vulnerability to adult manipulation. The prosecution acknowledges these factors, but reminds the jury that Sebastian Jones nearly died from their knives, that their violence was sustained and deliberate, and that youth doesn't erase responsibility. It merely contextualizes it within the sentencing framework. After 6 weeks of testimony, evidence, and argument, they reach verdicts in less than a day. Ravi Tailwar, guilty of murder. Kevin Waldron, guilty of murder. Scott Garrington, guilty of murder. The 3 teenagers, guilty of manslaughter, not murder, due to their ages and the legal complexities of joint enterprise for youth defendants, and guilty of wounding with intent regarding Sebastian Jones. The courtroom absorbs the verdicts in silence. No dramatic outbursts, no shocked reactions. Just the quiet acknowledgement that justice, at least in its legal form, has been delivered. The arithmetic is stark. £180 debt divided by 6 lives equals £30 per ruined existence. That's the exchange rate for pride. That's what happens when ego and violence intersect with drug debts and shotguns. The Castle Crescent case is closed, but its lessons remain open for anyone willing to learn them. If cases like this matter to you, if responsible, fact-checked reporting on UK true crime is something you value, consider subscribing to UK True Crime Files. We don't sensationalize. We don't exploit. We tell the stories that shaped and scarred Britain's communities, with respect for victims and accountability for facts.